Okay. All right. Well, Lucy's working in the background. So I'm going to just kind of start welcoming some of the folks who are kind of in on here right now. We do have just a mini PowerPoint to just kind of set the stage for all this, which I think is a really wonderful topic. And I'm really happy that CraftCon has invited us to talk about this. A little bit of setup on the overall panel discussion. I think we have an hour. We're going to be having a round robin of questions that we'll be talking about with each speaker. And as such, at the end, we're going to then have any kind of Q&A. I'm going to try not to pay too much attention to the chat on the side because that just really distracts me as a moderator. I wish I could multitask at that level, but I can't. And so I'm going to just ask my fellow panelists to see if they could just keep an eye on that as we go along and take notes if there's any particular questions. And let me close off. Oh, and here we go. Yeah. I'm going to close my mail. And there we are. All right. Thank you. And anyway, you could kind of just bring that down. Yeah, there we go. Awesome. Lucy, you're the best. Right on. Okay, well, shall we get started? Can I see everybody nodding their heads and we're grooving? Okay, great. We got to sort it out. Yay. Okay, let me just see if I get everything here. Okay, then we're going to begin. I'd like to welcome everyone to the panel discussion on bringing the bellies to the bar for CraftCon 2021. This first slide up, you will note, is a full complement of women seated at the bar with one guy there. I like to keep this in mind that the world population is 51% women. And as such, when thinking about attracting new customers, I'm not only speaking to one gender. Plus, I have to say, it's really, really nice to see a whole bunch of people sitting closely at a bar. And certainly this is something to look forward to as we navigate our way out of the worldwide pandemic. Can we have the next slide, Lucy? So you will see this is our following list of speakers and some very nice artwork done by Lucy. And I must say that I'm very impressed by all the folks working so hard to get CraftCon 2021 up and rolling. So cheers to all of you. We're going to start with introducing our first speaker. If you could go to the next slide. And we have Cath Potter. She hails from Manchester, which is north of London, for those who aren't familiar with the geography there. I know Cath best for her enthusiastic good cheer for cider. She's also a certified Pommelier and also a member of the UK group called Cider Women. So I'm going to throw the first question out to you, Cath. Can you just let us know what that means to be a Pommelier?
Yeah, it's like the cider equivalent of a sommelier for wine. And it involves quite a big investment of time for learning and developing, and you learn about flavors in cider, good flavors and not so good flavors. You learn about how to serve it, a little bit about how it's made, and then you have to do an exam and a project in order to pass the qualification. And I think there are 13 novels so far, but the course has now started again. Gabe is running it online. So if anybody wants to do it, then now's a really good time to do that course, because it's there, it's available to you online. Nikki, who's here as well today, is 4/5 of the way through her qualification, and hopefully that'll take place sometime this year as well. So we'll have 2 Manchester Pommeliers.
Perfect. Wow, that's fantastic. I just love it's just kind of lifting the whole industry up overall that you're doing that. And you didn't have to do that. You just kind of searched out and went for that. So bravo for that. We're going to go next up to the next slide here, Lucy, if you may. We have Adam Wells. Adam is a writer and co-editor with Cider Review, Graftwood, and contributes to Full Juice Magazine and Distilled Spirits Magazine. I've had the opportunity to work with Adam when he was kind enough to ask me about cider in America. And I must say that he's a really fine and prolific writer who embraces the long form. So Adam, can you fill us in a little bit about what it means to write in the long form?
I mean, that's kind of always how I've written whatever I've been writing about. You know, I just rather than just writing snap reviews or just, you know, little bits and pieces, it kind of gives you the opportunity to really dig into a subject, ask a few questions, yeah, and sort of see where it takes you, treat it as fully as the subject matter deserves, and often, you know, as when we did our interview, kind of bring in kind of more opinions from other people. So yeah, it's kind of it's not the only way to do communication, and obviously loads of people do loads of great stuff on social media, for example, which is much shorter form, but it's I guess it's what I'm used to. So that's kind of what I've always done, and what I do with Cider Review, Graftwood, and when I contribute to Full Juice and Distilled as well.
That's cool. And I have to say, Adam, I see a book in the making. You know, you keep all that content, and that's like a gold mine just waiting to happen. So bravo for that. We're going to move on to the next panelist, if you could, and that is Nikki Kong. She is the owner of Cat in the Glass, which is an online bottle shop selling cider. So, Nikki, I'd like to ask you, just to bring us all up to date, is the product that you're selling, is it available just regionally or throughout the UK?
So it's available throughout the UK via courier service. However, I am based at Beer Nouveau, a brewery in Manchester as well. So we're open at the weekends, so you can do click and collect or buy to drink in. So yes.
Bravo. And it's only cider, or is there any other products within that medium?
So it's beer and cider. So we have probably around, I think on last count, about 850 different beer and ciders at a rough sort of like 60-40 split at the moment. So it's growing. It's still growing.
Fantastic. Well, good luck with that. That's a big endeavor to take. And again, it helps lift the industry up, the more it makes it accessible to the audience. All right, we're going to go to the next slide. And that is a little bit about me. My name is Ria Windcaller. I'm the producer and host of Cider Chat, a weekly podcast. And as of this week, there are 270 episodes. I also lead Totally Cider tours, both here in the US and internationally. And as you could see on that photo, there's a little arrow down on the bottom one. That's me way in the back of the bus. And then up in the corner, there I am pouring out of a little keg because, well, why not? It's a cider tour. So that's who we have on the panel. Let's go to what we're going to be talking about. And this is the 4 main key topics we're going to be addressing today: audience strategy, content, and getting in the spotlight. It's our goal for those listening in to validate what you're doing and to also inspire you to reach out to even a wider audience that you could ever have thought possible. And hopefully by listening today, you'll hear what we're all doing and in our areas, and that will help you. These 4 components for me are really key in looking at the marketing of oneself or your brand. Please note, though, that none of us are commercial cider makers. However, regardless of what business you are in, the plan still remains the same. 1, to assess your audience. 2, to have a strategy. 3, to define your content. And I know when we look at content, what is content exactly that we're looking at? It might differ for somebody like Nikki versus Adam, or even myself. And then, of course, to get yourself out in the spotlight. And this is, I think, that's the end goal. But if you're doing these first 3 goals, then you are taking those steps forward. And certainly I know we're talking to CraftCon, right? And there's that piece where you make a really fine product, but how do you get it moving forward? So that's what we're going to be talking about. And again, we're going to be doing a round robin discussion on each area. If we could take it off the PowerPoint, that's the end of our PowerPoint, bring it to the main screen. And before we start, if we could all just raise a glass across the sea to you and me. Best wishes for the future of 2021, where we could all do this in person. Cheers. I picked a dry cider today because I thought that would be apropos, speaking to good friends here in the UK. So we're going to begin. First, we're going to shoot to Cath and just find out what do you see your current audience, and if you could just speak to that. Who's your audience that you speak to?
Well, when we started, we had a little campaign, myself and my partner, Dick Withicombe, who people might know, called Cider Buzz Manchester. And we were speaking to craft beer people, pubs, bars, bottle shops, drinkers, because we felt that they would have the palate and the interest to explore new things and new tastes in cider. And that kind of directly led on to the formation of Manchester Cider Club, which Nikki can talk a bit more about as well, because without Nikki there would not be a Manchester Cider Club. Whereas now I think a lot of that has kind of been reasonably successful. We had a Rethink Cider bar, the Rethink Cider campaign that various people, including Susanna, started in the UK. And we called our bar at Manchester Beer and Cider Festival, which is a campaign for Real Ale Festival in Manchester, a Rethink Cider bar. And we had lots and lots of new and interesting and different ciders that people hadn't had before. And that was really, really quite successful. So then we started to look at other drinkers, because it's not just beer drinkers that are interested in cider. There's a whole world of wine drinkers and people who drink other drink spirits. We have one of our regular people who comes to Manchester Cider Club who was initially mainly gin drinker, and she's really quite enthusiastic now about cider. And it seems that younger people these days, they don't identify them in the way that we maybe did in our youth. I was a real ale drinker. I was from Manchester and I drank Boddingtons, and that's not the way things are now. Younger drinkers drink what they feel like when they feel like it, and they're much more open to having different experiences with drinks. So that's kind of where we'll be aiming in the future, to talk to these more curious drinkers, if you like.
Mm-hmm. So you do have an eye on the future there, which is always key when we're moving forward in this area to attract new customers. I'm going to swing up now. I think it's Nikki or Adam, but let's go to Nikki. Who is your audience?
I think it's very similar to what Cath was saying about converting the craft beer drinkers. Having previously managed a pub in Manchester for 4 years, we won the Camera Pub of the Year award, and then the following year we won the Cider Pub of the Year as well. So yeah, from managing a pub, I guess it's quite easy for you to sort of give customers samples of ciders and sort of like introduce them in that way. Whereas now, I guess with the cat in the glass, it's more kind of you putting out the tasting notes of what you like of different ciders and promoting it that way. As well as through Manchester Cider Club, as Cath mentioned, we set that up in the pub. So we've been going for odd months now. So that's like it was a physical sort of like monthly meetup at the pub on the second Thursday of every month. But since lockdown happened, we've obviously had to adapt and move online. So that opened it up to everyone around the UK, whereby they sign up and buy the cider box, and then we distribute the boxes and a Zoom link out. So that's been brilliant to be able to share that with everyone, I guess.
And so with the targeted outside market now is the craft beer.
Yeah, a bit of both, and obviously still introducing new people to cider as well, but also with the beer drinkers, especially being based down in a brewery as well, you get a lot of beer drinkers. So when we crack something open, it's like, well, why don't you try this, see what you think of this? And yeah, the majority of them have really enjoyed it because it's different. It's not what they used to get drunk on as like a kid in a park. So
Yeah, cider's so much more fun to get drunk on, definitely. I mean, I'm saying that kind of teasingly, but you know, it has a feeling to it, to be quite honest. Not that I'm pushing that. I'm not pushing that. Okay, thank you, Nikki. We're going to go over to Adam and see what he says there on who your audience is, Adam.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. For Cider Review, I guess we're brand new. We haven't officially started our new content yet. So I guess we'll find out. And I suppose to begin with, it'll be mainly people who are already involved in cider. But I mean, echoing Cath, I think the critical thing for everything that we're talking about here is about kind of finding new audiences and starting with the people who are most likely to be receptive to what we have to say. So for the last year, I've written about cider fairly extensively on a site that was predominantly for whiskey. Which, if you're going to pick a drink that's as dissimilar as possible to cider, ostensibly, whiskey's not a bad place to start. But the point is, it was a site where people were used to coming for daily long form content about drinks that have been made in an interesting way, by people who are, putting their craft and their care into it. And the sort of people that are prepared to read 1,500 words on that sort of thing every day are probably not going to be the sort of people who are going to say, oh, another sort of drink. No, absolutely not. They're the sort of people who are really interested in a drink and are therefore, probably open to persuasion where another drink's concerned, and so it proved. We would have occasional comments saying, why am I reading about cider on this whiskey website? But we had just as many people, far more people, who would say, well, this is interesting, here's a new drink, here's something I didn't know about, I'll go out and try a few of these. And that's been reflected on Twitter. I mean, every Monday we do this, it's completely stupid, but we have this thing called Ridiculously Good Perry Mondays that just started from an off-the-cuff tweet that I sent. But the person who probably now does that the most is somebody who was formerly just a whiskey drinker, and now every Monday he sits there and he drinks a Perry, and he shares that. So yeah, it's all about appealing to people who are, or you may already be a cider drinker, and if you are, that's great. We've hopefully built a home for you, but we want to be very, very open to people who are interested in other drinks. I mean, as I say, I've written about whiskey for 6 years, but I've worked in the wine industry for 8 years, and if I've learned one thing, it's that the metrics of craft and care apply to whatever drink you might be interested in. I should probably at this point shout out Rachel Hendry from Beer and Collective, who wrote a wonderful article on this subject called "On Compound Drinking," which has kind of been picked up as a bit of a phrase, and certainly UK cider and beer Twitter. I always see it popping up now, but I think she put it beautifully. And so, if you haven't read that already, do go to Beer and Collective and look up On Compound Drinking by Rachel, because it sums up everything that we've been saying here.
Perfect. Thank you. That's a good tip. I'll talk about my audience. When I open up the podcast each week, I say it's with interviews with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks in the cider trade from around the world. So I would say that is my current audience on Cider Chat. However, because I also lead Totally Cider tours, the audience that I'm also gearing towards is foodies. I feel like you can't speak about cider without talking about food, and that's a reservoir that can be tapped into that is enormous, and just makes me so happy when I think about having food and cider. I also look at people looking for adventure, thinking out of the box, and there's a lot of folks, and certainly as we're coming slowly out of this pandemic, that is a huge audience too. I'm also looking for people who have green thumbs. I see that Marcel from the Netherlands is here, and he has like a farm that he has in the southern region of that beautiful country, and is making cider now. So there's a complement of people. I'm not necessarily looking at the craft beer drinkers, I have to say, because I think that will just happen. it's not my concern. I think it's just going to happen because they're energetic drinkers. But where I'm specifically pushing towards are these other areas, specifically the foodie population. So knowing your current audience and who you want your audience to be will help you with your next step on your strategy. So that's the next question we're going to go to. And I asked each of the panelists to provide maybe 3 different tips on a strategy that you are looking at. And I say this, and anybody listening, you might be going, oh, crap. I mean, I haven't thought about it this much. A strategy? Are you kidding me? But this is the reality of doing a business and attracting new customers, having some kind of strategy. So let's see what we have here. I'm going to again turn it back to Cath and see. Cath, do you have 3 tips of strategy for us?
Well, one I've already mentioned really, which is the education side of it. The more people learn about cider, the more they are able to make educated, informed choices about what they're drinking. So CAMRA has a Learn and Discover program for the campaign for Real Ale, in which cider has become quite prominent. And we are hoping that will grow. And we've also done quite a lot of publicising of the Pommelier course as well. And we found out just the other day that Felix Nash, who runs the Fine Cider Company, which is a wholesaler rather than a retail, and he supplies, excuse the dog, he supplies a lot of restaurants with cider. And apparently he's now, when he sells some cider to a restaurant, he's offering training to their staff. And this is definitely something that's needed. And I'm sure the people who are on here at the moment that run bars, also a lot of them are doing the same thing. We ran training for Nikki's staff at the Crown and Kettle. And I know that Susanna Mansfield has got a couple of her staff from their bars on the Pommelier course at the moment. So I think education is number one. The other thing is that because we're based in the city, the green thumb thing is a bit more difficult for us because we're not in that area where you can say to people, oh, come on, you could grow some apple trees. Or, I mean, we do have apple trees, and we have lots and lots of street apple trees and scrumped apples and all the rest of it. And urban cideries are growing, which I also think will be a big thing in the future. But what we can do is encourage people to visit the orchards, go around the orchards, meet the producers, look at the trees, see the apples. And again, CAMRA is pushing that at the moment to its members, whether they be organised trips or just people going and walking the orchards. I'd shut up because I know that was only 2, but I think I've talked long enough.
No, that was great. I think getting out to the orchards is a key thing right now. This is such a hot thing. People are so cooped up, and this is a perfect time, blossom time, to get out there. Nikki, what do you have to echo with Cath there in terms of tips on strategy?
In terms of strategies for the cat in the glass, I think social media plays quite a big part in being able to showcase new stock, like new ciders, where I've been. Like another one's like the personal touch factor of actually a lot of the ciders that I get in, I tend to go and pick up myself. So I get to go and meet the makers, and actually talk to them, see where the cider's been produced, how it's produced, and what's gone into it. And people tend to like the little stories or little quirks from like different places that I've been. And probably third thing, which I'm not very good at, admittedly, is having a regular, like, updated sort of blog or MailChimp to keep people in the loop of like what's new, what's coming up, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. And
Yes.
people don't really understand how much social media does take. That's why people are specifically working towards that. And you're getting going, but having that as your line, and I think a lot of folks listening know that that's so important, and and how do we keep on moving in that direction is really key. I'll speak a little bit to that, but I wonder,
Mhm.
Adam, perhaps you might be able to speak to that too. What are you doing there in terms of strategy?
I think the first point and the point it all revolves around is just talking consistently whenever you've got something interesting to say. You know, my 9 to 5 is in direct marketing, and a key kind of question around that is, well, you know, how much should I be emailing customers? And the answer is whenever you have something worth saying. You know, whenever there's something pertinent and useful for that customer to know. And you know, so this applies whether I'm running the blog. You know, the more often we provide interesting and relevant content, the more often people will come and read us. You know, if you're a cider maker, the more often you're talking about what you've just made, how you've made it, the more engaged people will be. You know, and obviously Nikki's already talked about how that kind of relates to being a retail business as well. And so that's the first point. Nikki's already said social media, which was going to be my second point. But yeah, again, you know, that's just one of the easiest, I suppose, channels to do quick communication in these days. I'm biased, so you know, I'm words, so I prefer Twitter. But obviously, some people are much better than me at Instagram. I'm a terrible millennial. But you know, whatever channel you're using, is just making sure that you're telling people what you're doing, you're engaging with them, you're saying thank you if people engage back to you. You're just building these lovely relationships. And the third point is going out of your way to engage with potential new audiences. So going back to what I was saying earlier, writing about cider on a whiskey site is weird, but it's a potential new audience that are likely to be receptive to long content about drinks. Thinking about what Cath does in Manchester, you know, cider is inherently rural. It's you know, and therefore for a long time it's being drunk by people who live in these rural places and are often of a certain demographic. But bringing cider into the cities is critical to taking the next step, because A, there are far more people and potential audiences in cities, and B, there are far more people who are in cities and aren't drinking cider or aren't having these great ciders presented to them. So that's, you know, absolutely critical when it comes to building a broader and more diverse audience as well.
Yeah, well said. You know, in terms of the social media, what I see, just taking the hawk's eye view of the world, I see Twitter is used quite a bit in the UK as a conversation piece. It's almost like you're hanging out with each other in the comforts of your home. The way the dialogue goes back and forth, and it's really inspiring to me. So being in the US, I look at that and I'm a little forlorn, feeling a little forlorn that the UK market has it going and the US market of makers and stuff don't chime in there. However, at the same time, Instagram is really where I see the US conversation going primarily. There's Facebook, but Facebook gets really populated by a lot of the same players. And Instagram gives you that ability to cover a spectrum of folks. And because you use hashtags, you're able to really populate your post and reach out. So I might do something like hashtag happy on my Instagram post. And if you look that hashtag up, you'll see it just, you know, has like, I don't know, 500 million different people are using that. And so that will populate to a different audience than I would do otherwise if I just do hashtag cider. So the key here is to getting out of the market of the same people. Not that we don't adore each other immensely. That's like key, right? You know, it's like we keep each other going, but we want to kind of push it out a bit. So I think that's interesting. Something that I really notice is how do we get more people so they don't feel like it's an exclusive club. So really key, and we should never feel bad if we can't do it all. I'm going to talk a little bit more about my strategy that I use. Number one, my first strategy is to be everywhere. And that might sound really overwhelming, but I don't think it is. So I'm always staying on top of social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and even some on TikTok. which is just amusing and kind of kooky and fun, which is good for all of us. And it's really what cider's a little bit about too, being kind of kooky and fun and enjoying ourselves. With that, when I post on Instagram, I try to just post once a week so I don't overwhelm. And I wanted to go back to what you were saying, Adam. You know, I've kind of struggled with that. Like, how often do I post something? Well, I could say every time I have something to say, but what do you do about fatigue? And how do you address that, especially from like a long format writer? How do you deal with fatigue of the audience? And do you have any thoughts on that? Because I do worry about that when I'm sending out emails and such.
You know, I can't obviously in terms of just write. We don't have a MailChimp or anything like that with Cider Review, but I sort of take the view that especially writing on a blog, those posts, when I put them up, they're not then going to disappear. You know, so I've written a quite long piece recently, which I kind of pretentiously called a taxonomy of cider, which was just my attempt to just cast a big tent, but under which any conceivable cider could be identified and defined with as much information as possible. And that's, you know, that's a 4,500 word long read, and not everyone's going to have time or inclination to just read that the day that I post it. But I guess I take the view that it's there indefinitely now. People will find it. You know, people don't have to read everything that I write every day if I'm publishing every day, which I can't imagine doing. But you know, it's there. People can access that information as and when in their own time. You know, and that's the thing with long form writing is and I guess podcasts as well is people don't necessarily have, you know, the 15-20 minutes to read a 1,500 word article or the hour to do a podcast, but you know, the information and the content is there as and when they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. I'll speak to that in terms of the pandemic. I made a conscious decision over 2020 to decrease my podcast from an hour. Folks are not commuting. People are not doing the same, and they do not have that time. And so it's been a whole switch in my format to try to keep it within the 30-minute range, and the response has been overwhelming. So yeah, time getting into the ears of people, such an intimate form. I don't want to waste people's time. And I think, just speaking on that, there's this feeling, I think it happens in both the industry and to our audience, of wanting to be included and feeling in the loop. And when there's almost too much information, it could be really overwhelming. Like, I can't keep up. You know, something's going on in Twitter here, you know, cool stuff, and then Instagram, and how do I put that together? So, do you ever think about that with your audience, on that overwhelm factor, and also having people feel like, I'm part of it, you know, because that's a good feeling. That's a feeling that we really want to hold on to, versus this is so overwhelming, or it's so technical, or I can't possibly even be witty enough to respond to that Twitter thing. I'm going to just sound like a jerk. I'm just going to send that up to the panel. So do you ever think about that? Or let me say it like this. Do you ever feel out of the loop?
Yeah, I think quite often I'll see what Adam's written this week, and I see it on a Monday, say, and then by Friday I might have got around to reading it. But I don't think that matters, because when I've read it on a Friday, then I retweet it, and a whole other lot of people then get to see the thing that Adam wrote last week. Do you know what I mean? And it's sort of it's self-perpetuating. But I just wanted to say something about Insta, because I've never understood Instagram at all. I can't see the point. You put your photographs on and everybody goes, oh, that's nice, until Taz, girl with the cider review, started the no apologies campaign, and she is a bit of Instagram whiz. And we all started doing that. That we have a couple of people as well with Cider Women that are also Instagram focused. Lydia is very good at Instagram. And I think because of that, I sort of saw the point of it a bit more. And you do get a different audience on Instagram. Also, TikTok, one of our cider club attendees, sorry, this dog is driving me mad, is that age group. And she did like a little TikTok condensed video of a Manchester Cider Club and put it up on TikTok. And we were like, oh, we're on TikTok. Hey, that's good. But it, you know, all these different things reach a different audience. And I think it's this inclusivity that we're aiming for now with cider. We're not aiming for the craft beer boys with the beards, but we are aiming for people who appreciate that. And there's a lot of women's beer drinking groups. There's in the UK Crafty Beer Girls, there's one in Glasgow, there's one in, they're all over the place. Beers Without Beards that Nikki's supported for years. And if you talk to those women, they're interested in cider. You know, because it's something different. You know, yeah, they drink beer, but they're interested in cider. And cider, there's one way to put off a potential audience, and I've got to say this, and that is if you persist in having sexist or other derogatory imagery on your product. And sadly, we're still seeing it. And sadly, it's small within the cider group, but hence the No Apologies campaign, and hence this, it seems like continuous fight every few months. Oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. And that kind of wears you out, but you've got to keep on at it, because you will never grow your market and grow your sales if you are using imagery that would have been bad in the 1920s, never mind the 2020s. Sorry, that's my piece said.
I know that's in a hot topic right now, and it is a topic. And in terms of marketing, it gets cider out in the forefront for better or for worse. So in some ways, it brings a conversation to the forefront, and people are saying, "Oh, look what they're talking about," which might be welcoming to people who otherwise wouldn't even look this way to cider. Having been in the craft beer industry for so many years, I would say the same thing. The same topic has been part of that for quite a long time, and was really on the forefront of very big marketing ads. Before we go into that, because that does go on to enticing your new product, I just wanted to finish up on my strategy, which was one, to be everywhere. So Cider Chat is available on all podcast archives and whatnot. Consistency is absolutely important, and I think this would speak to any of the makers out there. Having consistent product, also being consistent at some kind of pattern. If you're doing some kind of social media, even if you could do that only once a week, just do it once a week, so people will look forward to it. You'd be surprised who's looking for something from you that week. And then producing quality content is really important to me too. So I think Adam and Nikki and Cath, they all know what that means, whether it's what you're producing in the written format or in media, or in the events that you're holding, and also the conversations you're having online. So let's go on to what entices you to try a new product. Cath, I think we know what doesn't entice you, and you're speaking to a choir here on that. I'm going to go up to Nikki. What entices you to try a new product, especially from your vantage of having an online bottle shop? Because that's also informative for the commercial makers who are on board listening right now, to give them a little cue there.
That's a good question. I think branding is quite a big one, because people do tend to buy with their eyes, don't they? So if they see something and it really stands out and looks good, people automatically sort of make a beeline for that product. And especially at the moment, like, because I've got my cider just out on the shelves, and as you can see, all the different labels, and people, like, if they come in and have a look around, they'll be like, oh, what's this? This looks really cool. So they tend to try it from that. From a personal sort of point of view, what sort of like entices me to try something tends to be a lot on kind of like word of mouth, or like trusted authors. Like if I've read something that Adam's written, for example, or James Finch, I think, oh, that sounds really interesting, I will probably go and try that. So yeah.
So labels, it's always about labels. It kind of goes back to that.
Yeah, it is. Like customers, that is what they look for. Like personally myself, like, yeah, it's not the be all or end all, but for a lot of customers, it tends to be, yeah, if it looks good, or if it's like going to be hazy, it kind of puts them off it. And yeah, people still sort of drink with their eyes, I think.
Maybe we're going to start seeing labels called, we have like the hazy IPA happening now, and that's right on the label. People actually look for that on the label. All of us know that hazy cider has been part of it for a long time. Do you think we'll start seeing hazy cider on labels? What do you think?
No, it's not needed. I guess like people like me and you and Cath and Adam, like, will know that the cider is so good, but just like a lot of consumers tend to think otherwise, don't they? Because they're used to seeing like your mainstream ciders, and it's all clear and crisp and things like that. So yeah.
Well, I'm going to make a bet that we're going to see cider labels with the word hazy on it. I'm just going to put that out here on this day here, April 29, 2021. And when I see it, I'm going to tweet it out to all of you. Okay?
Okay, I look forward to it.
or not. Adam, how about you? What entices you to a product, and conversely, what would turn you away?
Well, I mean, I'm low hanging fruit. I buy almost everything. But when there's so much choice, what stands out to me is the producers who have taken the time to show their working on the label. Like, what apple varieties have you used? What methods have you used? What have you done? Why should I buy your cider rather than any of the other hundreds of medium or sweet or dry ciders? What's the difference? And then, as Nikki says, people do buy with their eyes, and I know, I review ciders every week. I know that the label doesn't make a difference to the actual taste, but again, it's proof that some sort of time and attention has been given to something, and people do buy with their eyes, and it's something, especially if we're talking about ciders, that people maybe want on a dinner table, or that they want to share, or show their friends. There's never not going to be a majority of people who are interested in buying with their eyes and going, that looks great, I'll try that. So for me, the information is kind of absolutely top of the tree, but presentation is hugely important. And I think an example of a cidery who does both of those things incredibly well is Little Pomona. Their labels all look beautiful, but then you turn the label around, and they have, they've put a huge amount of time and effort into writing a really detailed description of what this cider is, what it's made from, how they've made it. And they usually do a food pairing and a temperature serving suggestion, which I think way more ciders should do, because I think loads of ciders would just get automatically put in the fridge by most consumers, and that just doesn't happen. So yeah, I mean, they're Little Pomona and Rough Cider particularly are two of my lodestars, I guess, when it comes to labels, both image and detail. But so what would turn me off, I guess, is A, not being given those things, but B, just, I mean, Cath's already harkened on the non-inclusive, sexist, misogynistic labels, but it's also, we are all on social media now, there's been a lot of discussion in the group on the right. It's not just those labels. It's cider makers who openly either approve of those labels or say they're not sexist and have their heads in the sand about it, or in some other way, contribute to making cider a non-inclusive sort of society, or difficult or uncomfortable society to be in. I mean, just last week there was an instance of this, and obviously it's only in that instance one cidery that's perpetrated the image, but you then see on social media all these other makers who are saying, no, it's fine, that's not sexist, that's totally appropriate. Why, and not only that, but lambasting the people who are saying, no, this isn't appropriate, take this imagery down. So it's how you conduct yourself as a maker, as a producer, as a small business person is, just as critical, because word gets around, and if people see, well, this cider maker has endorsed this instance of misogyny or non-inclusivity, then people aren't going to buy your cider. So it's not just not doing the images; it's being seen to say these images are inappropriate. There's no place for this. If you're making a place for those images, and you're trying to shout down those who are suggesting that those images are offensive, then you're just as culpable as the people who created the image in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So there's a time not to be on social media, essentially, is one way to kind of cut to the short here. I would also, social media of Facebook, I really want to recommend, while we have this forum here, to really speak to the commercial makers who are posting on social media or having a industry discussion, to not put that out on a medium where folks who are consumers can see that. So to be really conscious of that, you're posting, and keep conversations in that. And you only have to look at spirits, wine, or beer to see that they are keeping that within their industry, and to really be cautious, because if we're trying to lift up cider and bring it as a professional, quality, quaffable drink, we really want to know when we shouldn't be on social media. So I'd just like to say that the piece that I really entices me for a product is a story. And so it's not just a label, but it's a story. And that's what I'm seeing on social media, how people conduct themselves. So it's kind of echoing what everybody says, but it's really important to me to see how the producers are making it so cool. And then just going back to what Adam said, and on the labels, and Nikki, let's face it, animals and cartoons really work. People love it. Sometimes it gets a little wiggy on the labeling piece for people, for like the TTB here in the US. They block things coming in from Europe from times because of that. But, who doesn't love animals, right? We got Alfie and we have the cat. I mean, come on, it's beautiful. All right. I want to get to the last question here, which is kind of like the key one about getting in the spotlight. So how can makers get the attention of media, buyers, and Pommeliers? Cath, can you speak to that? And you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I was pressing the wrong button, microphone button. I think our session wins the animals so far at this CraftCon, I've got to say.
It's a dog and cat fight. Watch out.
Yeah, they've never met.
Yeah.
I think part of it is what you just said in relation to the last question, which is that people are engaged by the story that people have got to tell about their product. And what brings a new thing to my attention is that story. We do this because that we have an organic farm, we do this because of that, or whatever, or we're setting up a new urban cidery and we're looking to use up all the waste fruit and waste apples all around the Manchester area. All those sorts of things are what engages someone like me to want to try the product. And also, I think, going back to what Nikki said again in the last, this sort of personal recommendation from people that you trust. And Nikki won't say this, so I'm going to say it for her, that a lot of the success of the Cat in the Glass is because people know Nikki, trust Nikki. And if Nikki says she's selling it on her web shop, they know that it's going to be something good. Whether it's exactly to their taste or not to their taste really doesn't matter. They trust her to make those sort of choices, so that they can go on the web shop and say, well, I've not had that before. I'll try this and I'll try this. And loads of people do that. So I think it's a combination really of getting your story out there. That's where the cider clubs come in, of course. Which are multiplying at a great rate in the UK. I don't know about the US, but we now have Birmingham, Bristol. There's talk of various other clubs setting up soon. And each of those club meetings that has a cider maker there gives that cider maker an opportunity to put their story out there to a certain number of people who are at the club. And then that ripples outwards to a much bigger audience, and I think that's quite important. I think Susanna's Mansfield is going to do something in Durham when we can actually meet face to face again. She started it. So this sort of thing is getting more and more common, and more people are interested in these clubs, and I think they're going to keep growing, whether we continue with online ones or whether they all go back to in the flesh based where people can turn up. But things like at Beer Nouveau, Steve, who's the owner and the brewer there, he has every few weeks he has a bottle share on a Sunday afternoon. And that's been expanded to include cider, because of course now he's also the home of the one of the newest urban cideries called Temperance Street Cider. Great name, isn't it?
Can you repeat that name again?
Temperance Street.
Temperance Street. Thank you.
The reason is because it's called Temperance Street.
Got it.
Great name for a cidery, though. So all those sort of things bring you to people's attention, and also for people to personally go. Somebody asked a question in the question bit about whether we thought that makers should personally go and speak to bottle shops and bars and restaurants about their products. And I answered them. I said, absolutely, yes. I think that that personal contact is quite key, actually, to getting people to stock your product, especially if you take some little tasters. That's what we did when we started Cider Buzz in Manchester. We went to loads of bars with a plastic bag full of half bottles of cider, good cider, and said, here, try that, try that, try that, try that. And that really works.
So just to paraphrase what you're saying, meeting people in person, that obviously we can't do that fully at this point, but that's really important, and the story is key too. Anything the other two panelists, Adam or Nikki, would like to add to that in terms of getting product in the spotlight, so that you want to bring it online or you want to write about it?
Do you want to go?
Well, Cath pretty much said everything I would have said as well, in terms of the personal touch and getting to actually try the ciders. I remember when I first got into cider, I knew nothing about cider like 3 years ago. I met obviously Dick and Cath, and then Albert, who came and did a tasting at the pub that I managed, and it was just an eye-opener. I remember trying Raisin Detra for the first time, and I was like, wow, this is like what cider actually tastes like. So yeah, I think the personal touch, to be able to actually try the ciders in the tasting or something like that, is really helpful.
So it's kind of oldest time. Get out there and you have to kind of stomp the ground, which is what cider makers, certainly here in the US, have been doing for the past 30 years. Meet the people. How about Adam? Do you have anything else to add to that piece on getting on the spotlight, or how you select people to write about?
What we've been saying for the last hour. I'm interested in people who kind of show who they are, what they're doing. And obviously it's not always possible to do things in person, and we've seen that obviously particularly for the last year. But there are so many instances, whatever social media you're using or your own cidery's website, to really show who you are, what you're making, how you're making it, what you're making it from. I mean, there's one cidery in Edinburgh called Dower Cider. I've never tried their stuff. I think they're brand new. They've just pressed for the first time this year, but they're, really intangibly enthusiastic about it on Instagram. They're showing what they're doing. They're engaging people. They're showing themselves doing it. People are kind of buying into that, and I'm fascinated. I can't wait to try their cider as and when it becomes available. And I've never tasted anything of theirs yet, so obviously because they've not made it. So that's how you kind of catch people's eye. It's just showing who you are and showing your work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just kind of finish up here on this. I get a lot of queries for interviews on the podcast, probably about 100 a week from makers worldwide. And as such, I really want to encourage people, if you're reaching out to media, try to do that professionally. Don't start the email like, hey, for folks like Adam and myself who are spending a lot of time producing content and helping lift cider in that way, it's really important for our work to be respected the same way we would like to in turn be respected. Know what we're doing. Know that Adam writes in the style that he does and what he's doing, or that Nikki is doing a certain kind of shop, or Cath in her way. She's a Pommelier. She did a lot of work for that, and she knows the ropes around that at this point. So we want to keep it, if we want to be respected, we want to keep it at a professional level, then let's really keep that standard for all. So know what people do, and to really bring your story forward. So if you're engaging, you're reaching out to someone, myself or other writers, don't put it upon us to say, hey, well, we don't know anything about your product. If you might have to send some to us. It gets awkward. You don't want somebody to be talking about a book without having the book in front of them. And I would say the same thing is true for media too. So know what people do in the media if you want to reach out. Don't just shoot it out and assume. I know that could happen. And certainly I was talking to somebody on one of the networking sessions just today, and they knew all about me, but I had never met them before because they listened to me, which is really cool. And I love that. So it gets a little awkward. And so it's on my end to really make people feel welcome. And I think the same thing is true for cider makers. When people show up to your tasting rooms or they meet you in public and they say, hey, I've had your cider, and then they don't say anything, that could be awkward. So think, what is the next thing to say to them? And I really recommend the next thing is to say, thank you. That's really awesome. How did you like it? So start with a positive and keep it in the positive. So I know that we're at our time limit here. And Lucy had mentioned that there were a couple questions online. I'm not sure if we addressed it, but there was one from Albert. Is it a problem that in cider accepted knowledge can vary so much? And is cider more subjective than other drinks, or is that just through the producer's lens that I feel that? I see that Cath is shaking her head no.
I'm thinking of beer here.
Thinking about
I can't bear dark beers. Personal choice. So, the spectrum of craft beer goes from, I don't know, really light lagers at that end to these, what did somebody just send me? An ice cream porter. No, thank you. I don't want to. But some people love an ice cream porter. So
right.
I think that the subjectiveness is there in all drinks. Maybe not spirits, I don't know. But maybe that's my taste buds. I'm not a great spirits drinker. But, I can tell the difference between beers that I don't like and beers that I do like. But I can also tell whether they're good beers that I don't like or bad beers that I don't like. And I think it's exactly the same with cider.
Yeah. Adam?
Albert has elaborated that he's talked in terms of what is correct or not, and Susanna has sort of echoed him there. I think cider being more fledgling and also being predominantly made by much smaller producers and served to a much smaller audience has yet to reach the kind of really broad consensus on what constitutes a really good cider, and inevitably there are a lot of ciders on shelves that I personally, as a consumer, might consider to be faulty. I don't think that comes down to subjectiveness. I think that comes down to a lack of people who, comparative to say beer or wine, who have drunk or read about or tried loads and loads of different ciders and have a really clear idea in their head of exactly what a totally clean cider is. So I think sorry, Albert loves going on this topic, and I think at some point I've got to I think we've kind of got to say question answered, but yeah, I think we're yet to fully reach that consensus, but I think that's a lot to do with education and to do with the fact that cider on this scale is still a really kind of rarefied sector compared to beer or wine. You you go back 40 years, wine was riddled with faults, and it was hard to buy a bad bottle. These days, faults in wine are not eradicated, but your chances of buying a faulty bottle are so much lower. So I think to answer Albert's question, I don't think it's that cider is inherently more subjective. I think there's probably other factors there, and I think it comes down to consumer understanding and consumer awareness and a good line of kind of education from producers and people like ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, well said. Are there any other questions coming up? Because we're kind of like, I think 5 minutes over. Anything else that anybody would like to bring up, or anybody who'd like to be invited on to talk to us in this short amount of time or something? Does the panel think we need to see more makers engage with venues like bottle shops and bars face to face? Definitely. Sam asked that. Absolutely imperative. Nothing beats face to face. Of course, with Zoom and our new world kind of format, this is working really well. But I really recommend following that up with an email. Coming out of the pandemic or going into the pandemic, there was a real scarcity mentality. And I think that could kind of prevail through in the cider world. And nobody wants to hang out in scarcity. We want to keep it abundant. And that's one thing that I look for in terms of attracting customers and new listeners to my different forums, is to really keep the abundance and the well wishes there. So I'm going to ask if there's any last statements coming from our panelists on that note before we sign off for now, because I'm not seeing any questions or anything. I hate to say goodbye to you because it's so nice to see everybody's faces. Anything else? Shall we raise our glass one more time? Oh, just go from the bottle because that's the best. All right. Well, so once again, thank you to Adam Wells, Nikki Kong, Cath Potter, and this is Ria Windcaller saying cheers to you all. Cheers to 2021. Best wishes.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks very much for having us.
Cheers, Nikki.